Hi, I'm Jack. Welcome back to my channel and a new video. Today I'm going to be reviewing the brand new release Exorcist Believer. And the story here is following these two young girls who go wandering out into the woods together by themselves, and after being discovered 3 days later with no memory of how long they've been gone for, they start to show signs of demonic possession. So I actually just did a revisited review for the original Exorcist just the other week, and I was actually amazed by how much more I got from that film watching it again so many years later, because the first time I saw this, I actually grew up always hearing that phrase surrounding the film of the scariest movie of all time. You know, so shocking. It had people passing out and checking themselves into mental institutions, all this crazy marketing around the film. And I just went into it with those kind of expectations to be completely shocked by it. And I wasn't, so I did leave it quite disappointed, but I didn't actually remember a lot about the story because of that. So going back to it again so many years later and just kind of appreciating it on its own terms, given its age as well, and getting into these characters and the story with the slow descent of this young girl, Reagan. You had this really creepy and shocking performance from such a young actress with Linda Blair, which I loved. And I just felt like it was quite a deep film. It had quite a lot going on. It's a movie that after you finish watching it, you just want to discuss with people because it's quite a rich and interesting story. So I was very skeptical when I saw that David Gordon Green was coming back after his Halloween trilogy to direct a Exorcist Legacy sequel. He would nowhere near have been my top choice for a filmmaker to do an Exorcist sequel, not even in my top 10. So when I first saw those trailers as well, and this looked to me like a very generic possession film with that Exorcist brand slapped on the front of it, yeah, I've went into this extremely skeptically. One thing I will say though before getting into this review is it's nowhere near as bad as people are saying. I'm seeing on YouTube right now so many of those clickbait thumbnails saying this thing is the worst horror film of the year, absolutely atrocious. You know, you've got critics on Rotten Tomatoes giving this like a 20% rating right now. It is nowhere near that bad. So definitely go and see it for yourself and make your mind up, your own mind up. Don't go off of all of these sort of really over the top reviews you're seeing online, because I just honestly think it's nowhere near as bad as people are saying. That being said though, this is still a very mediocre, bland and forgettable horror movie, and is especially disappointing given that association with that name of The Exorcist. And to me as well, when I came out of this, it does feel like a studio product and not a true creative vision from a director that really loves that original Exorcist, who wanted to do something unique and interesting with the story years later. It doesn't feel like that at all. You know, it's doing the old thing here as well of using cameos and bringing back old characters and marketing them in the trailer as playing a big role in this story in order to get people out buying tickets for this film, which does feel in poor taste, to be honest. So I can understand from that perspective why some people will feel frustrated coming out of this movie. So starting off, what I did like about this film though, I do really think it is one of two halves, where the first half of the movie I actually liked a lot more than the second. It really did have me quite engaged. A lot of intrigue built here as well, with this sort of mystery and how it starts off, especially when you first get set up with this character of Angela and her dad. You see they've got a really good bond between each other, despite the fact that the mum was killed in this accident years before. You still get to see between these characters this kind of real closeness between them. So you do really feel the impact of Angela first going missing and how it affects her dad. And I think really the best and scariest part of the movie as well is when these girls have first been discovered again, and it's 3 days later and you find out they've wandered off like 30 miles into the woods. And I did think that was the scariest, most intriguing part as well, this kind of disorientation and confusion the characters first have when they're found. And you can tell there's just something a little bit off about them. They aren't quite these kind of young innocent girls they were before. You can tell there's just something a little bit off about them and the behaviours they're starting to show. And I just think, to be fair to this film as well, like, it's all very professionally done. All of the effects look really good. You know, they're not using any cheap CGI for any of the more horror effects and stuff. You know, you can see that they have put effort into making this film and giving it a good atmosphere and making all of the possession scenes and the more horror sort of focused stuff look really good. And to be fair, I was fairly engaged with it. You know, I didn't get bored and start looking at the time or anything. You know, it's quite a well-paced movie. So in those respects, I think it is done fairly well. The first main problem we have here really is that the movie just simply isn't scary. And when, again, you've got that name association of The Exorcist and you're going into this and you don't even have the scares to deliver on, then you really do have a problem. I think even when you compare this to the recent release we had with Talk to Me, which is a far better possession movie than this one. And again, it's 1,000 times more scary than this. So in that respect, I was hoping that even if the film wasn't going to fully work on a story level, I thought at least it needs to give me the adrenaline, give us the scares, and to be honest, I really feel like it failed on that level. As I mentioned as well in my intro, you have these cameos thrown in here which don't serve any purpose to this story, especially with Ellen Burstyn. You know, if you look in the trailer, you'll see that it looks like she's gonna be quite a large character within the movie. And everything you saw in that trailer is pretty much all the story development she gets here. She's in it for a very short amount of screen time and just a few small changes to the story, and she could have been removed and it wouldn't have changed a single thing about this. Without going into spoilers, there's a particular scene with her as well where I was really questioning the logic as to how that scene managed to play out. Again, I'll probably do a spoiler review as well on this, so I'll let you know my thoughts on that when we get to it. But the way she was used here, I just simply think it didn't work. And again, gave me that kind of feeling of they've just got her here to show this for the purposes of marketing the film, not because they actually really have a good reason to bring her character back into this story. You know, to me, her story arc was summed up perfectly by the end of the original Exorcist. There was simply no reason to bring her back again here all these years later. The main thing I think though that's really dividing people about this movie is that whole third act, everything going on with all the townspeople coming together and the actual exorcism itself. I think this is the act that's really going to decide whether people enjoy this movie or not. And now I'm not going to get into any major spoilers here, but I do want to talk in a little bit of detail about what's going on here in order to get my thoughts out. So if you're someone that wants to go in completely blind to this, please do come back and see everything I'm saying from now on. Come back to that after you've seen the film. So the way the final act plays out is you have this exorcism that's going to occur and a load of all of the townspeople come together in order to perform this exorcism. And it's kind of leading up to this throughout the film, you know, like it did in the original. But the problem is here that I have, and you have to discuss religion here when discussing this film. There's simply no way around it. But the way the Exorcist story is that when I go into this film, you have to go in with the understanding that within the story that the Christian religion is true, that, you know, demon possession exists, that exorcism exists, you know, everything involving the cross and how you can overcome it and all this kind of, you have to accept that all of that stuff is true within the context of the story. And just to clarify fully, I'm not a religious person at all, but I'm able to suspend my disbelief from my own perspective for this story to go along with the story that it's telling effectively. But I feel like this film is not consistent with that worldview, so it ends up feeling very strange. So when you get to the exorcism at the end, you have this big group of characters that come together, and they're all kind of from different belief systems. Some are Christian. The main character we're following is an atheist. You have other people who are just more spiritual type people. And the way this exorcism is performed is not really in any sort of Christian way. It's more of a, I don't know how to best describe it. It's like they do the exorcism by just kind of the will of the people sort of thing. It's almost like it's trying to give a message that if you all come together and work together, we can overcome anything sort of thing. And that's how they rid these two girls of the demons. And I guess the message of the film is like more of a metaphor for real life, that, you know, rather than looking at religious ideologies, people need to come together and actually, come together, put their, sort of ideologies, political or religious things aside, and work together to overcome things. And I do kind of like that message, I guess. But within the context of The Exorcist and the story that it's set up, it just feels very strange to me. And especially as well that the main character we're following, he's the only as far as we can tell, he's the only really non-religious character. He's the more grounded one who's looking for real practical things that he can do in order to help his daughter. And he's definitely portrayed as the most likable person in the film. All of the religious family of the other girl and all of the people in the church and the community that come out to help with this situation, they're all kind of portrayed as if they're very deluded and they're kind of quite shallow characters and aren't likable at all. I just think it was a really strange way to do an Exorcist film. And it doesn't really make sense to me, to be honest, as again, despite the fact that I am not a religious person, so I can't sort of resonate with the feelings of those other people in the film. It just felt like a very strange way to portray the movie, I think. And that's what was missing in comparison to the original, where these characters of these priests that you were following, they were quite deep characters. I was really able to invest myself in them, and it felt really consistent within the ideology and the worldview of the Christian religion when you get to that final Exorcist. And you have quite a complex story because you're dealing with a priest who's kind of losing his faith, but having seen this girl, it kind of changes his feelings on that and, sort of brings him back to his faith. Whereas here you don't really have that. And there's a particular scene that happens at the end as well that enforces that idea even more to me. I think that maybe David Gordon Green or the writers of the script aren't particularly religious people, or maybe even a little bit anti-religious in just the way that this story is told, and especially the way it concludes. And if you wanted to do that idea in another type of film, maybe you could make that work. But within the context of an Exorcist sequel, I simply just don't think it works. So overall, there's my thoughts on the new Exorcist Believer. It's not a terrible film, but it is bland and it is disappointing. I've heard much better things about the new Saw film, which I'm still yet to see. So I think if you're looking for a new horror release right now, you're much better off going to see that than this new Exorcist film. This is definitely one you can skip. But if you really are intrigued to see this, I would say go out and make your own mind up about it, because I do feel like though the current reviews that are up on YouTube, IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, everything like that are extremely negative, and I'm not sure they're entirely justified in that. So again, if you're really intrigued to see this film, don't be put off. Some people will definitely like this. It's not an out and out bad film. There's definitely some good stuff to take from it. But for me personally, as a legacy sequel to The Exorcist, I couldn't help but feel really disappointed leaving this one. I think as well they should draw the line here with this. and stop their plans to go on and turn this into a trilogy, like I believe they were thinking of doing. There's nothing more in the story to be told, in my opinion. They really do conclude the story here. And given the reception of this, I will be surprised if they decide to make another one. But I think to do any more out of this now is really just going to feel like using any reason they can to find a way to get another Exorcist sequel out there, rather than having any real reason or any real interesting story to actually tell us. So I'm hoping that this just remains a single film in itself, because they simply just don't have the reasons to justify making another 2 of these films. So anyway guys, there's my review of The Exorcist Believer. I hope you've enjoyed my video. Please do let me know your thoughts on this as well if you've seen it. It does seem to be quite a divisive film. I will be interested to hear people's thoughts. And also at the end of this video, I will leave a card to my review of the original Exorcist, a much better film, and again, one that I love talking about, so please do go and see my review of that. I am as well going to continue on with this Exorcist review series. I have already seen 2 which I've reviewed, and I am going to go through the rest of them as well and get my thoughts out over the next week. Thanks a lot for watching my video. Please do like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.